Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Russ, K5TUX, Cheryl, W5MOO, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 501 of Linux in the Ham Shack, the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. You have tuned into a deep dive episode because the previous episode was supposed to be our deep dive and instead turned into our 500th episode free-for-all. So now we're doing a deep dive, and tonight we actually have an interview, so that is really cool, and we'll get to the interviewee here in a second. But before we do that, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
I'm Cheryl, W5MOO.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right, and so our interviewee is a member of the FreeDV development team and leadership team. He is, I didn't say what his name was yet. Boy, my brain. Yeah, it's been tax day, so I may be thinking of other things. Anyway, let's go ahead and welcome Mooneer Salem, K6AQ. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Really glad that you could be here tonight to talk a little bit about FreeDV. We have done, I believe, two sort of dedicated to FreeDV episodes in the past. The very first one with Dave Rowe was a long time ago at this point. So I'm glad we're able to revisit it, thanks to the fact that I'm sure you've got new stuff going on, and the fact that the ARDC has decided to give you a whole bunch of money to advance the art of FreeDV, which we'll get into that soon enough. But let's talk a little bit about you. What's your background in maybe technology and amateur radio, and how did you get involved in FreeDV?
So I got licensed initially in the early 2000s, and I played with it a little bit, and then life got in the way, so I kind of wasn't in amateur radio for a while. And then within the last 5 or 10 years, I started really getting back into it. And I forget how exactly I think I found FreeDV mentioned somewhere, and I decided to play with it for a little bit. And then it kind of was I thought, oh, it's cool. And then I didn't really do much else with it for a while. And then I decided to revisit it one day and realized that they didn't really have a Mac version. So I decided as my project, I was going to go ahead and try to get this working on the Mac. And then that's when I started getting more and more interested in FreeDV. And then eventually I ended up doing a lot of the main development, mainly along the lines of the user interface and embedded type development. And speaking of embedded type development, I actually work for a medical device company. I'm doing embedded C and C++. So that's my day job outside of amateur radio and open source type stuff.
All right, very good. So I know Dave was sort of focused on the audio codec 2, and that's the part of FreeDV that sort of underpins the whole thing. And other stuff is now being developed using codec 2 as well. So that's where the heart of FreeDV is. But of course, it's a whole application built on top of that, designed for primarily doing digital voice, i.e., crystal clear audio over HF, so that you don't have to deal with all the static and noise and all that kind of stuff. It's a little, I would say, non-trivial as far as the setup goes, because you have to have essentially two sound devices, but you do have some hardware at this point. So before we get into a little more about how to set up FreeDV in your average life, talk to us about the hardware, because the last time we talked about FreeDV at all, I think the hardware was pretty new.
So there's actually a couple of hardware devices now. There's the one that you were talking about, which is called the SM1000. That's basically an STM32 microcontroller with a built-in microphone and speaker, and that supports a subset of the FreeDV modes. And those modes are called 700 Delta Echo, and 1600. There's actually and it has like a few ways you can interface it to your radio. There are separate jacks for like the audio input and output, for example, or there's like a combined RJ45 that you can build your own cable out of, and that's actually a pretty good device. Unfortunately there hasn't been for sale in a while because of the last few years and the chip shortage. So that leads us to the second device that I've mostly been working on, which is it's called EasyDV, and that's basically it's an ESP32 implementation of kind of similar to the SM1000, but there's a few differences. One being that it has built-in Wi-Fi support, being an ESP32. So what that gets you is effectively wireless interfacing with, say, for example, the ICOM IC705, and it also gets you like a web interface where you can change settings, and maybe a little bit friendlier way of changing settings, especially since a lot of the SM1000 is the interface for that is basically CW, and I know there's definitely a subset of hams that don't understand CW, myself included. So it is nice that there is a web-based interface to change settings and that sort of thing. The EasyDV is not for sale yet. That's currently in active development, especially since I've mostly just been doing the hardware development, and I definitely haven't really gotten any formal training in PCB design or like electrical engineering type stuff. So it's every time I send out for a new set of boards, I end up finding some sort of hardware problem. So then eventually that's something we'll have to discuss more with the rest of the leadership team as to whether we want to sell that along with the as officially as part of the project, or have that be its own thing. But it is the source code for that and the hardware schematics and stuff are available online on GitHub right now, as well as for the SM1000.
So I guess if you can get a hold of the parts, you can build them. Correct.
The one thing to keep, I guess that might trip people up, at least for the EasyDV, is that it does use a lot of 0402 and 0603, pretty small SMD components. So and I think there's like one BGA component on there as well. So I know for myself, I have to get the board manufacturer to manufacture prototypes for me, because I would not be able to solder BGA type stuff here at home, for example. But the files are like the KiCad files are available, and you can in theory submit those to JLC PCB or another board manufacturer and get boards assembled that way.
All right, that's good to know. So before we get into more of the nuts and bolts about FreeDV and its operation and setup for a user, maybe you could talk a little bit about the philosophy of FreeDV and Codec 2 and why this all came about in the first place.
So back in the 2000s, there was a program called FDM-DV, and that was basically a digital voice implementation using a commercial codec. And for a while, hams were basically using it and enjoying it. But the thing is that it was operating under this kind of gray area where the company didn't say that we were allowed to use it for this purpose, but they didn't say no either. So, but then, like, of course, one day, the long story short, the company decided that we as in the ham community were no longer allowed to use it. So FDM-DV kind of just died pretty much because of that. And that kind of led into David Rowe developing, well, that and along as well as the patent encumbrance of the other existing voice codecs. For example, AMB for D-Star and DMR Infusion. So that kind of led to David Rowe developing the Codec 2 library, and which is basically an implementation of digital voice. Initially designed for ham radio use, but you could use it for other purposes if you'd like. And the nice thing about Codec 2 is that there are no patents to worry about. And since it is open source, it can't necessarily be shut down by a commercial entity either. And initially with Codec 2, there was like one mode that was supported, 1600 mode. But then, of course, more and more modes were added onto that over time. And these days, the FreeDV application actually, I believe, can do like at least 6 or 7 different modes. I'd have to look at the application again to be sure. But there's definitely been a lot of development with Codec 2 since it first came out, for sure.
All right, I'm pretty sure, but I'm going to guess anyway that the 1600 and the 700 refer to the audio bandwidth of the application.
It's more I believe it's more the bit rate is what that stands for. The modes are typically around the same sort of take the same amount of bandwidth or similar amount of bandwidth, around like 1 to 1.5 kilohertz or so.
Okay, so obviously it has to operate inside of bands that allow for at least 1.6 kilohertz of bandwidth to operate.
Right. It kind of gets into the whole how the FCC regulates the bands. Like there's a symbol rate limit we're all familiar with, but FreeDV and other digital voice modes are considered phone modes. So that same sort of limit doesn't really apply. But of course, because a lot of the other digital voice modes that exist already are a lot wider than 1 or 1.5 kilohertz. Like for example, D-Star on HF is like 6 kilohertz, or about the same width as AM, and like Fusion and DMR are like at least twice as much. So other hams would probably be very unhappy if you try to use like one of those on HF, for example. So that's one of the nice things about FreeDV, is that it is a better like user spectrum for sure.
All right, very good. And I just have like kind of a personal question to throw in here because I was just thinking of it. So one thing I've noticed, at least when I've used FreeDV, which to be fair is not that often, but part of the reason it's not that often is because when I do try to use it, I notice that there are just not a lot of people using it. So what do you feel is the reason that there's not a lot of uptake, or is it simply a case of this is still really a development project and we're not pushing it yet?
From what I've been to a few hamfests and that sort of thing, and I have talked to other people who've used it in the past, and the impression that I've gotten is that a lot of people did try to use it early on when FreeDV wasn't as developed. Maybe they, for example, like one person I remember was saying that they tried to use it like years ago and they weren't happy with the minimum signal to noise ratio, and so it didn't seem like it was good enough at the time to be a viable option. But now that there's been all this additional development, like for example, the 700D mode can operate to lower SNR than the modes that were available in the past. So it is more resilient on weaker propagation conditions, for example. So I think like a lot of the issues that existed back in the day, like maybe aren't as much there anymore. But the key now is to get people to let people know that there's all these like enhancements and it is worth giving another shot, or potentially try it for the first time as well if you're a newer ham and haven't actually heard of it before. So
how would you compare it to like D-Star on HF as far as operation and audio quality and stuff like that? I know the few QSOs that I've had using FreeDV, the audio quality of course has been excellent because that's what it's designed for. And I've never actually been able to contact somebody using HF D-Star, but I know it's a possibility. So can you compare and contrast those a little bit?
I will admit that I have only tried D-Star and HF once, but when I first got my IC705. But I did notice that I didn't seem to get out as far, if that makes sense. When I tried to check into the weekly D-Star net, I think only one person was able to hear me. And some of that can be chalked up to I live in an environment where I am antenna restricted and I don't have the best antenna, and I can't really go much above like 50 watts, for example. But I think some of it does come down to the fact that D-Star is significantly wider, so whatever power that I am able to put out is spread out over a wider bandwidth. It's similar to how sideband tends to fall down, like analog sideband tends to fall down first when the conditions get bad before, say, like FT8, for example. But the audio quality wise, I'd say D-Star in general, at least on VHF and UHF, I'd say it's pretty good. But I am used to digital voice with DMR, D-Star, and Fusion. That is one of the other things that I've heard from other people, that like digital voice in general does have that robotic type sound, and some people aren't fans of that. So that's definitely one of the things that we're going to be looking into as improvements in the future.
All right, very good. Well, next thing on my list in my head here is to go into sort of the basic operation of FreeDV on anybody's computer, whether they're using Linux or Mac or Windows. But before I get into that, I want to see if Bill has anything else here he wants to interject.
Oh, no, we're good.
I know sometimes you have questions, so.
I'll butt in when I'm ready for that. So.
All right, very good. So we're going to get around to the ARDC and stuff in a minute once we get past the operational part of this. But so just give us a general outline of what components are necessary on your computer to get this operational, and for the average user, what you're going to need hardware and software wise to get it set up and running.
So if you're running a Windows or a Mac computer, it's actually pretty easy. There are pre-built binaries for both platforms that you can download from the FreeDV website. And with those, the necessary dependencies are already there. So you just run the installer in the case of Windows, or you open the DMG on the file on the Mac and you drag the FreeDV icon to your applications folder. On Linux, the source code uses the CMake build environment. So, and the CMake is definitely designed to such that, like, if there's dependencies that don't already exist on your machine, it will grab them from the internet for you. But in the README file, there's a set of packages you can install from whatever distribution you're running, say Ubuntu or Debian or Fedora, for example. So once you have those installed, there's a build Linux script that you can run. And on Linux, at least, I definitely recommend you use Pulse Audio and not Port Audio. Pulse Audio tends to work, or Pipewire tends to work a lot better on Linux these days than Pulse Audio. Basically, you would specify Pulse Audio as the parameter to the build Linux script, and it would know to enable that and compile in the necessary libraries and etc. There are also distribution packages for FreeDV, but they may be at least a version or two behind what the latest development is.
All right, so let's get into the one part of FreeDV that I always found the most confusing, and I think an average user might also find the most confusing, is the fact that it generally needs two sound cards. Now those sound cards can be anything. It can be like a little USB dongle or a headset that provides a USB audio device or something like that, but you do need two of them. Can you explain sort of the architecture, why that is, and some of the gotchas of having that set up?
So one of the sound cards is basically the analog sound card. It's what your microphone and speaker or like your headset is going to be. And this can be something like a Bluetooth headset or or some sort of USB headset plugged into your computer, or even just your built-in sound card on your computer. The other sound card is effectively the digital side, which is what connects to your radio. And a lot of newer radios do have a built-in USB interface, and you can plug that into your computer, and you get another sound card that way, as well as a serial port for cat control. And as well, the other interface could also be something like a Signal Link or a Rig Runner or another sort of Vox type interface. So in short, if you're already set up for FT8, for example, you're about 50% of the way. You're likely 100% of the way there, if not at least halfway there.
Okay, because if you're set up for FT8, then obviously you have a sound card between your radio, whether it's a Signal Link or a built-in, like the IC71 has a built-in sound card, so that will count for one of them. And then your speakers and microphone, or even your camera mic or something like that, or a USB headset will count for the other one. So that should be all you need hardware-wise.
Correct.
All right, so the user interface is pretty straightforward. I know there's some places you can go to find out FreeDV calling frequencies and stuff like that. Google is definitely your friend in that. There's also a QSO Finder. What was the URL for that? I can't remember it.
The URL is qso.freedv.org, and basically it's kind of similar to IRC if you guys have ever used that before, in where there's a text-based chat and you can coordinate with other people that way. But then each person who's logged into the chat has a frequency associated with them. So you can see where people are on the bands, and you can also report where you are on the bands. And that would give you and other people the ability to QSY to your location. So it's basically another tool for coordinating contacts effectively.
All right, very good. So one thing I noticed, or at least I remember from our early days of using FreeDV when we first talked to Dave about it, was that I was having problems with getting the two sound cards to like sort of operate. And one of the things I found was that like the audio bit rate, like the 44.1 or 48,000 had to be the same sort of across. And if you change things, it got a little weird. Is that still an issue?
That is actually no longer an issue. The code, we added some code on the application side to auto up convert and down convert. So all of your devices in the configuration can be different sample rates, and it should be able to handle that no problem at all.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, I'm definitely planning on trying this again. I've been firing up all kinds of old applications. Somebody wants me to play chess. One of our listeners wants me to play chess using HF Packet, which definitely sounds like a challenge that I'm willing to accept. And I've also actually fired up QSS TV to do some slow scan for the first time in quite a while. So definitely looking forward to trying out FreeDV again. So I know we've talked about this before. If you want more information about how to actually operate FreeDV, we've done past episodes about that. Just search for FreeDV on the website, and there's some like tutorials type stuff. And of course, there's probably good information on a wiki or a GitHub site or something like that, right?
So there's actually a lot of information on the FreeDV website, and there's also on the GitHub there's a user manual available. And that has a lot of good information about setting up and running FreeDV as well.
All right.
And then,
go ahead.
Sorry. And then failing that, there's one of the things that we just recently created is a Discord that you can join and like ask questions on there as well. I tend to be listening in there, and there's other people who are in there as well. So if you have any additional questions, that's another good source to ask around in there.
Well, I need an invite to said Discord.
Cool. I'll definitely do that after.
All right, fantastic.
There's actually a public link on the FreeDV website, and you can click on the join as well.
All right, that's fantastic. All right, so let's get into the new hotness, the money that you received from the ARDC, over $400,000 for development of FreeDV. So let's talk a little bit about the future of FreeDV and what this grant is going to help you guys do.
So one of the big things that we want to do is use that money to basically pay for additional development. So one of the big things is potentially hiring a DSP engineer. There tend to not be that much DSP type stuff on like in the open source community. So for a lot of DSP like type development, you tend to have to go out and do paid development effectively. So a lot of that funding will basically be towards hiring people to actually dedicate their time to improving the audio codec, for example, or potentially some of the other parts of the Codec 2 library, as well as the FreeDV GUI and potentially some of the hardware stuff as well. And then another little bit of that money, we're hoping to actually expand our marketing a little bit. So, for instance, have more of a presence at, say, various Hamfests. One of the big things that would be nice is to, say, go to Dayton, for example, and potentially have a booth. But that's something that we need to work out as to what exactly how we're going to be spending that money wisely, for sure.
All right. I admit I was trying to connect to the Discord, so I kind of missed a little bit of that. I heard some of it. So, Bill, answer a follow-up so I can deal with this or ask a follow-up at least. Because at least I hope you were listening to that. I know
Yes,
he said, they were hiring developers and stuff like that. I got that whole thing. Oh, but before you ask a question, isn't Mike like the audio guy? Isn't that his whole thing? Or Dave, not Mike. I don't know where Mike came from. Mike came from microphone.
David Rowe does have DSP and experience, but he also still has a day job. And of course stuff outside of amateur radio, just like all of us. So someone who could, so definitely more help more help from other people is definitely appreciated, and it would allow us to progress with development more quickly for sure.
All right, really good. But you have a day job too, so
I do have a day job.
so you want somebody to work full time on FreeDV? That's what you guys are looking for.
I think that would be good. Like I said, we still have to iron out what the terms of that sort of work is going to look like. So that's something we have to work out with the rest of the leadership team, as well as our fiscal sponsor and potentially ARDC as well.
All right. Really good. So, Bill, go.
Yeah. So, you mentioned getting some marketing going with some commercial vendors and stuff like that. Have you guys had any interest yet, or any like early signs of some interest from some names we would recognize?
So there has been some work on getting FreeDV built into radios. For example, the MCHF radio, if you guys are familiar with it, does have FreeDV built in. And there's also if you're running an SDR like the Hermes Lite, for example, there's a SDR program called Quisk that also has FreeDV built in. And I know in the past there was a working waveform for the Flex 6000 series radios, and so one of the nice things that we would like is to eventually get that working again and be able to have Flex users basically click on a FreeDV button inside Smart SDR and operate FreeDV without having to install anything else. So and I know Flex has definitely been really interested in FreeDV in the past, and hopefully we'll be able to work with them to get that waveform back. And I know so that's at least some of them, and I'm sure there'll be additional manufacturers and other people who are interested in building FreeDV into their own products.
Yeah. So it makes sense, especially for like Flex, where it's all pretty much software driven anyway, to be able to kind of slide this in even as a module or something like that. I can definitely see that as an easier path than to go and say, to ICOM or Yaesu to add firmware or something like that on one of their rigs to make it all work as well. So that actually makes a lot of sense and stuff like that. So the other devices you're talking about, the EasyDV and the SM1000. So those are, I was trying to find the schematics and stuff like that. Are those on the GitHub as well, in the main GitHub storage area, or is that stored somewhere else?
I know EasyDV is. I don't remember where they are exactly for the SM1000.
Okay.
That might be something I'll have to Google and send later for the show notes.
Okay. Yeah. No worries on that. So are you guys going to, since you're formalizing everything as sort of the foundation, I'm assuming, or something like that, are you guys going to be moving all the repositories into more of a group thing? Because I know they're mostly sitting under Dave's account. So
I don't know if you're familiar with the Software Freedom Conservancy's stance on GitHub. As part of us joining the Software Freedom Conservancy, there is definitely that is definitely one of the to-do items, is to move away from GitHub to another repository host of some sort. And I imagine as part of that, we would be combining all the repositories into one location.
I'll go with like GitLab or something like that.
Possibly. We haven't figured out where exactly we're moving to yet, but that's one of our to-do items for sure.
As long as it's not SourceForge. Yeah. No, that's interesting. So you said you have a fiscal sponsor. I'm assuming that's the 501c3 that's handling the financial side of the grant that you got. Who's the fiscal sponsor?
Software Freedom Conservancy.
Oh, okay. So that's all together. That makes sense. I guess you guys will be new to that experience, so I guess we won't really have any opinions on that yet, how that's going to work out yet.
It's definitely a learning curve. We are working through that and figuring out now that there are expenses, and we are pushing them through. So that is something we are learning, and as we're going along, and I imagine it will get easier as development progresses for sure.
And is there any plans from the leadership team to form your own nonprofit to be the foundation for this project?
I know we investigated that when we first started the grant process, but then we've at the time we determined that it was more work than we were able to put in at the time. That would be something we would be revisiting, probably revisit eventually, but there's no current plans for that right now.
Okay, that's really cool. Russ, anything else?
Sure, you just wanted,
or you're still in Discord land.
No, I was advertising the show over there on the FreeDV Discord. So,
there you go.
Trying to get some more people over here to listen. So no, I don't really have a lot more. I mean, I know we got Dan sent you the press release about the ARDC grant and everything, and I think we've covered most of that. And do you guys have a timeline, I guess, for any kind of future advancements, whether it be software or hardware related? I mean, like the EasyDV, do you have any idea when you think that kind of thing will be in the wild and readily available?
I can't really comment on a specific. I know for the ARDC grant, it is for a 2-year period. So, and at the end, we write up a report for ARDC for sure. For EasyDV specifically, I don't know when or if that's going to be available for sale. One of the complications is that, of course, I ended up falling down the rabbit hole of FCC compliance recently, and it turned out that there's a lot of complication with that as well. It doesn't seem like EasyDV as it is right now would be able to get by without like going through the legal process, which is getting it tested and that sort of thing. And that's going to add time and cost as well. So we definitely will need to discuss more on what the timeline would be for a future release of, say, EasyDV.
Do you have somebody on the team working on like advancements in the UI and stuff? I know you're developing FreeDV, the application for Mac and stuff, but is it sort of static the way it is, or do you guys have plans for advancements or features or anything?
That would be something we'd have to discuss some more. But there over the last few years, there have definitely been enhancements in the user interface. For example, one of the recent things that came out, I think it was one of the most recent releases, is there is an easier way of configuring the sound setup now, or really application in general. First time you start FreeDV, there'll be an easy setup dialog basically will come up, and it's the workflow is optimized more for the common case where you have like a single sound device for the radio side and one or two sound devices for the analog side. So the idea is to make it a little bit less confusing for people to do like the basic configuration that you need to get on the air versus what was done in the past where you were given like 4 different sound devices and you had to choose all 4 devices, for example, like 2 microphone and 2 speaker devices effectively. So we've definitely been making incremental improvements in the usability, and I'm sure there's going to be more improvements in the usability as time goes on.
All right, very good. Does FreeDV also have like integrations like other digital software packages, digital radio software packages have, like logger interfaces or DX trackers, or even a link to the QSO Finder or anything like that? Do you have any integrations like that, or thinking about them?
There is an integration now with PSK Reporter. That is something that both sides of the contact will have to have enabled. But if both sides of the contact do have it enabled, then when you transmit, it will other people who've heard you on the air will report on PSK Reporter's website. And there's a specific FreeDV mode that you can select from the drop-down list of modes on that site and see everyone who's used FreeDV and like who's currently listening and over the last 24-hour period effectively. In fact, if you go on there right now, you'll probably see a fair amount of traffic because this weekend has been the monthly FreeDV activity day, which is another good time to go ahead and try FreeDV. And that came about to try to solve a lot of the issues with not really hearing people on the air. So activity day is basically a one set period of time where to get people in the FreeDV community together chatting on the air. And it's not really a contest, like there's no points and you don't have to submit logs or anything like that. It's kind of similar to what JS8 called as for their monthly event, where it's just a time period and you get on the air and you chat with other people using FreeDV effectively.
Well, that sounds good. Now I wish we were recording earlier.
Well, it's the third weekend of every month, so there's definitely another chance in a month or so.
Oh, very good. Well, I definitely hope to get into it myself for sure, or back into it again because I haven't used it in a while. But there's only so many hours in a day. I'm finding out rather frequently these days. So, so usually we wrap up by asking you, like, is there anything you want to tell us about the project or the grant or anything that's upcoming that we sort of skipped over? And also like to try and highlight members of the team if you have some folks who are developers or team leaders that you want to give some credit to here.
I mean, I definitely will give credit to the rest of the FreeDV development team. So David Rowe for sure, because without him, that definitely wouldn't be here talking about FreeDV right now. And then Walter Holmes, K5WH, who is really, really a big advocate of FreeDV in general and does a lot of testing type stuff, and managed to get like a big group of people down in the Houston area using FreeDV, so that's really nice as well. And then there's there's actually a lot more people than I would that I'm not sure we'll have time for, but definitely there's been a lot of people. Definitely thank the FreeDV community in general for giving FreeDV a chance and sticking with it, because it's definitely a worthwhile mode. At least I think it's a worthwhile mode, and I'm glad that we're all here on this adventure for sure.
So did we miss anything? Is there anything you want to touch on about the application, the hardware, the grant, or anything else that might be of interest to folks listening?
So if you're definitely if you're interested in helping out with FreeDV, like software development or potentially working on the like doing hardware type stuff or codec type stuff, definitely get in touch with us. And if we also welcome pull requests, so you can go ahead and just fork the any of the repositories and work in there if you'd like as well. Hopefully we'll talk more as a leadership team and figure out like how the paid work is going to go for sure. And once that's ironed out, I'm sure we'll make an announcement about like how to apply that for that sort of thing.
So what is FreeDV written in, and how is it licensed?
The FreeDV is written in C and C++. Well, FreeDV is written in C++, but the Codec 2 library is mainly straight C. And Codec 2 is under the LGPL, and I believe the application it's either LGPL or just straight GPL. I'm blanking offhand. That's
okay. It's easy enough to figure out. So it's definitely copylefted. So. All right. Very good. And give us a quick rundown of places where people can contact you, find information, and that kind of thing.
So the website for FreeDV is freedv.org, and that has links to the downloads and the Discord and at least some of the GitHub repositories. I'll go ahead and in the show notes there'll be a link to the repository for EasyDV as well. And like more of the hardware stuff as well.
All right, good. We'll make sure we have all those links posted so everybody can find out more information. Bill, anything else you want to wrap up? And let me throw it out to the folks listening here live and see if anybody else has any questions they want to send your way before we go ahead and wrap it up.
No, I don't have any more questions. That's I'm real excited to get back into it. I just compiled it myself for my system, so I realized I haven't had it on this new system yet, so compiled real easy, no problems.
Did you say there were packages for different distros or not yet? Linux specifically.
There are packages. They may be a few versions behind the latest.
What is the latest? Just so we have that here.
The latest official version is 1.8.7. There is a test version of 1.8.8 on the GitHub repository. The difference between that and 1.8.7 is the addition of a 2020 C mode. But other than that, there aren't really any major differences between those two.
All right, very good. I don't see any questions coming out of the live participants here. So I think we're good to kind of wrap it up. I want to thank you, Mooneer, for being with us here. Really appreciate you showing up and telling us a little bit more about the FreeDV project, which, like I said, we have talked about before, but we've kind of let languish for a while. And it's good to see that it's out there and still going. And now you've got some financial stimulus, and hopefully that really puts FreeDV on the map. So thanks again for being here.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, fantastic. So you can hang out if you like, or you can go on your merry way or whatever. And we're going to have Cheryl come in here and do our little social media to wind up the show thing. And there's a lot of missing data in there because, once again, I haven't had time to ferret out all the new folks who are our social media participating in our program at this point. But we'll let you do what we do have.
Okay, so apparently you forgot the announcements and feedback, so I'll go ahead and
I did do that too. So go ahead.
Don't forget our Handvention GoFundMe. We're close to getting there, but not quite. And the link for that is lhs.fyi/HV 2023. So, please help us cover our expenses for that. And thank you for the ones that have already done so. And for our new subscribers and etc. For subscribers and Patreons, we have Brian, Katie8IOU. Russ is slacking off on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. On Discord, we have Slauermere P, Arin, War High-Techs, Sweet Ian or Saint Ian, and Katie8IOI.
Oh boy, that's a typo. It's Katie.
Yeah.
Close, but no cigar.
Brian, yeah. No Instagram, no Mastodon, no merchandise sales. Brian, Katie8IOU, join our mailing list. And this time in our live chat, we have Steve, KA7HVT, Winston, KD2WLL, Ted, WA0EIR, Steve, KJ5T, and Don, KV2YSI.
All right, very good. I will actually, by the next episode, get all of those things. The 500th episode, Spectacular, brought us a lot of social media contacts, and I've got a very long list that's going to take a few minutes on the next episode. So be aware that that's coming. But thanks, everybody, for listening, especially those who are here in the live show and those who have supported us financially. But we also appreciate each and every listener, because if it weren't for you, there'd be no point in doing the show. We hope you learned a little something. Hope you try out FreeDV. It's free. It's free in every way you can think of free. So check it out, and maybe we'll have a QSO in the future. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. This has been our deep dive episode number 501 of Linux in the Ham Shack. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
I'm Cheryl, W5MOO.
And I'm Bill, A4RD73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Our website is located at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast by visiting the LHS Patreon page at patreon.com/LHS Podcast, or by using the contribute list on the homepage. We have a presence on Discord, Facebook, IRC, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also drop us an email at info@lhspodcast.info, or leave us a voicemail at 1-909-LHS-SHOW. That's 1-909-547-7469. Visit the online LHS merchandise store at shop.lhspodcast.info for fun and fashionable show-themed merchandise. Until next time, remember to always heed your hedonism.